All right. Hello and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk or we're going to continue on our series on common OCD and anxiety mistakes. My name is Matt Cotty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the creator of the AAA Response and the founder of Restored Minds. And so before we dive into this episode, just wanted to let you know that if you're looking for help with OCD and anxiety, we have some links right down in the notes to get you started. Whether it's learning more about what's going on, learning about the AAA response, you can just check out those links right there. You can also visit us at restoredminds.com. And if you're benefiting from the show in any way, please help us out by liking and subscribing, as well as leaving a comment. And then if you're joining us via podcast, please leave us a review over on iTunes or Spotify, as it just helps with the algorithm of the show. So in this series, we've been diving into common mistakes that I make and that I see a lot of people make on this journey of recovery, when you're dealing with OCD and anxiety. And so in the first episode, we talked about, or in the first part of the series, we talked about not prioritizing recovery, right? And just kind of procrastinating it, right? And what you'll find if you do that is that just tomorrow never comes, right? You just always come up with some kind of reason why you're not going to do this right now. And a week turns into a month, turns into a year, turns into decades. Seen it happen time and again. Like, this needs to be something you prioritize, because you can't live the kind of life you want to live if you're constantly in a fight or flight state, right? You're always going to be living from a place of fear. The second problem, or the second mistake that we talked about, was going the lone wolf route. Right. And then we talked about, the problem with that being is that you're just going to spend a lot of time doing the wrong things. And then you're eventually going to figure out that it's wrong and go back to start, to square one and start again. And going the lone wolf route means you're going to have to go this trial and error route of wasting a lot of time doing the wrong things. And then we talked about in the last episode, fighting with thoughts and, all the problems that come with trying to solve this from a thought perspective. And while that you might perceive that that's the problem that you're experiencing, because that's what's causing you, so much distress and discomfort is the intrusive thoughts and the thoughts, realizing that's a secondary symptom to the issue. And this leads us today to this idea of implementing the wrong treatments. So, and there's so many directions that I wanted to go with this. And so I'm trying to kind of, really consolidate what I want to talk about. But, there's, if you aren't approaching this, if you're approaching this by trying to solve the wrong problem, you're obviously going to, do the wrong interventions, right? Kind of like we talked about in the last episode with the mud problem. If you see this as a mud problem instead of like a leaking pipe, then you're going to do the wrong intervention. This is what happens with a lot of people. So, and while it's very well intended, and the people that offer these interventions, I'm not saying that there's not a time and place for these interventions. It's just that, like with anything, the proper treatment and intervention needs to be offered at the proper time in the recovery process. And so what a lot of people do is they first maybe go to a therapist, right? And so very, very common for people with OCD and anxiety is what I hear again and again is, I've been through 4, 5, 6 therapists. And one of the most common things I hear people say, and this is what I felt too, was just that, like, I just felt like the person didn't understand what I was communicating to them, in the sense of, I was trying to get help by this therapist or, counselor or whatever. And I was explaining, and I can just feel internally that they didn't know what I was experiencing. And then, and I've heard all sorts of stories of, like, and not, this is not, like, again, any shade or any disrespect to counselors who don't, know the proper interventions of exposure response prevention and understanding the loop and all that stuff. Because again, having gone through graduate school myself, I mean, just to kind of really be transparent about how that works is, like, when it comes to, like, the clinical intervention that you're offered in formal graduate school, it really is not very high, right? You don't really get, like, an in-depth, like, we had a whole semester on covering the DSM. And when we're talking about, like, my formal training, whatever that means, like just the training I got from the graduate program I went through. Like we went through anxiety disorders in like a day or two. And of that, like, I think we spent like 3 or 4 slides on OCD. And this was in like a master's program, right? I didn't learn what I know and how to intervene with this in graduate school, because a lot of it, they're just presenting very high level overview theories and concepts, and there's a lot that they cover. And with a specific problem, you have to be very, like, again, you have to understand it on a very in-depth level. And so if a therapist hasn't done their own extensive like training and getting guidance from someone who really understands, they're not just going to know from going to graduate school. So don't ever assume that like just because someone has a license or a medical, and that goes with medicine too, right? Like don't assume just because someone's a licensed professional that means that they understand how to intervene with everything, because they don't. And if someone tells you they're an expert in everything, like that's silly, right? It's like it's a very false narrative that they're presenting, because it just can't be. And that's why you generally want to seek out someone who is explicitly trained, right, in OCD and anxiety, right? And that's what they specialize in, because if that's what you're experiencing, they're most likely going to lead you on the right path. But a lot of people, what they'll do when it comes to implementing interventions is they will start trying all these things to get rid of feelings. So they'll try meditation, they'll try acupuncture, they'll do all these treatments that are meant to, again, help regulate the nervous system. And what the issue is that if you're implementing those while you're consistently doing compulsions and spinning the wheel, you're not going to be able to regulate the nervous system, because you're conditioning the nervous system to be activated the whole time by doing your compulsions. Hopefully that makes sense, what I said there. Like, and so let's use an example of someone who has contamination OCD, right? Or like a very common, very, very common subtype, where someone's having these fears of contamination or germs or disease, getting their nervous system gets activated, right, and gets anxious and starts with the fight or flight. And then they engage in washing behaviors that then make them feel clean, which then activates, a sense of safety. And the problem is that by doing the washing, it validated that the thoughts were really a threat. So the brain keeps producing the thoughts, and then they keep getting activated and then keep washing, and so on and so forth, right? The issue is that and so when they get really anxious, they perceive that to be the problem, right? And if you're treating the anxiety as a problem, you're going to do things to try to change feelings. And if you do that, and whatever it might be, again, yoga, working out, it can be all sorts of interventions, right? Let's just be honest about that. Talking about your childhood, doing more traditional psychoanalysis, psychodynamic, right? These interventions, they have their place in time. The issue is if you're consistently activating the nervous system and then trying to get rid of feelings, it's not gonna produce any long-term results. This is why, like, breaking the wheel has to be the first thing that we really do. Right. And I'm not saying, like, look, I totally am an advocate for things like meditation, acupuncture, right? These are practices that I engage in my life, right? Still, I'm not saying that it's not, there's no place of taking care of the body, but if we're using that as a primary intervention while we're still activating this wheel again and again and again, it's kind of like we're paddling upstream. Like we're not going to get anywhere with this over the long run. And this is why people will say things to me like, I've tried all these interventions, and it's not that these interventions are bad in and of themselves. They are just not, they're not going to break the wheel. And once the wheel's broken, then there's things that we can start integrating to, again, help with the body regulation, getting the nervous system back to, parasympathetic state, and so on and so forth. But when we're implementing the wrong thing at the wrong time, it's not going to produce results, right? And this is just a common mistake that I see people. They're chasing all these different interventions and they're just switching from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. This is the person who is always, again, reading the next new book that comes out, reading, again, chasing the next supplement, the next quick fix. And what they're really doing is they're just trying, again, to survive. I mean, they're just really trying to survive and they're doing everything they can. And it's not that they're not trying to help themselves. That's the thing. I'm not discrediting, because I did this for a long time. It's just that you have to implement the correct interventions at the correct time. It's not like there's not a place for past reflection and healing past wounds. There is. You can't do that, though, when you're in an activated fight or flight state, because you don't feel safe. Like, you have to feel safe enough to be able to go into like, past wounds and things like that. And this is why the ERP, right, and really eliminating the safety behaviors that are spinning this wheel needs to be implemented. That needs to be like the primary foundational, intervention, especially when we're talking about this OCD and anxiety loop. And then once your system begins to get more and more regulated, it's like, yes, you can integrate all these other things as well, and they're all great. But it's like, if you're not doing this, I just want to really stress this idea that if you're implementing the wrong treatments at the wrong time, like, it's not going to produce the results that you're looking for. And this is for anything in life, right? If you have a torn knee, like, when I tore my knee up and needed surgery, it's like, if I'm not addressing that, and I'm trying to address all the secondary problems of like falling over and using crutches and stuff like this, it's like, no, that's I need to fix the core problem that's going on. So if you know that OCD and anxiety is really like the core thing that you're struggling with, then getting in front of someone or going through a program that really is going to guide you on breaking that loop and really doing it correctly is really what you're going to need to do. And I'm just going to try to be as blunt as I can about that, because the issue with a lot of mental health, the mental health field in general right now, is that really anyone can just tell you they can help you with OCD and anxiety. Like, there's no limitations on how someone can market. And a lot of people, and I've seen this, and again, licensed professionals, will sit there and advocate on, oh yeah, I can absolutely treat anxiety and OCD and things like this. And then, one of the things, if you're looking for help, that you need to do is ask them, okay, like, how are you going to do that? Like, don't just assume that they know. Because if they're like, oh, we're going to talk about your past, and they're not mentioning things like ERP, they really don't know. Right. And I mean, and I hate to, it's just the truth. And it's tough to hear sometimes, but I've just seen it so many times where someone spent, months, if not years, with certain counselor or therapist, and all the person's done is essentially just reassured them and actually made their OCD and anxiety worse. This happened to me. I was meeting with this counselor, and the person would just constantly reassure me about my fears, and I would feel better. I would leave the office feeling better. And then another thought would pop up, and then I'd spin for a while, and then I'd go back and I'd get reassurance. And this loop like, that person became my reassurance, that my new drug. And I was just paying for reassurance, which is wild when I think about it. But the person didn't know that's what they were doing, right? So it's not like a knock on that particular therapist. It's just they didn't know. They thought they were helping me because I would tell them, hey, I feel better when you tell me this. This is why, really getting clear on what the problem is you're dealing with and implementing the correct intervention is just so important. And why I wanted to make this series is because there's all these interventions that I see people try that get them nowhere. And it's not that they're bad interventions. It's just they're not being used at the right time of the journey. And that's why it's like, when we have this particular issue, we have to intervene correctly here, and then we can move to the next steps. But you can't bypass this step here. right? We really got to make sure we break the wheel and get out of it. So hopefully this was helpful. And I think this is going to tie up our series on OCD and anxiety mistakes. Because I mean, I know I can talk, about many, but I think I just wanted to kind of tie it up with this and really make sure that we're, again, if this is what you're struggling with, again, making sure that you're moving towards the correct interventions, and really making sure that you're doing that in your life, because you can't just trust that someone's guiding you correctly always, right? Like you can't just blindly assume that if the therapist wants you to talk about this, this, and this, and this, that it's actually helping you. And that was one of the things I had to learn the hard way, is that I had to, invest all this money into getting reassurance from this person to finally learn one day, like, oh, actually that's making you worse. And I was just like, what? Like that's a painful realization. So with all that said, if you're looking for kind of an outline of this path and guidance and stuff, again, the links in the notes, I think will be a great place to start. And then also you can hit us up at restoredminds.com. And, if you're looking for counseling and guidance and stuff, and there's someone, what I would always recommend is actually interviewing the person and really making sure that they're communicating to you what their intervention is going to be, so that if it's in alignment with what you're really supposed to be doing, instead of just allowing them to kind of walk you on whatever path they want to walk you on. So, yeah. And then, in next week, we're going to open up a new series that I'm excited about. So, looking forward to that. And then obviously check out our other things that we do with the OCD and anxiety, frequently asked questions. So if you have questions, you can always submit it for that, and we'll be happy to consider it as an episode. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Hey there, hope you enjoyed that recent video. We really would appreciate your support real quick if you could like and subscribe to our channel. And if you're looking for help with OCD and anxiety, please check out the links below or visit restoredminds.com, as we'd be happy to help you on your journey. Thanks so much.